Now I feel better.
Hey, welcome back to ThinkTech Hawaii and the whole gamut with Hillary Weinberg, and I'm here today with the ThinkTech original founder, everything, Jay Fidell, and we are going to talk today about why life on Hawaii is so damn expensive and the Jones Act. Jay, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming
Nice
back.
to be here, Hillary. Thank you for asking me.
So, one of the main reasons that Hawaii, or one of the many, many reasons why it's so expensive, other than, the price of paradise, is the Jones Act. Can you explain to our listeners what the Jones Act is?
Yeah, but first, I just want to say that when you're an isolated island, you have special situations. And when you have, Hawaii, you have a special situation. And, what we have here is an island state where too few people own too much land, and the price of occupancy is higher than it should be. The largest landowner in the state is, guess what? The state. But there are those in and around the state government who feel the state has to hold on to that land and should not allow it to be used, for example, for housing or affordable housing. And this shrinks the amount of land that's available for development.
So is this environmentally protected land, or is it just land that they're holding on to?
They all have lots of land. I mean, all kinds of characterizations for the land. It's reserved land, but it's also the land you wouldn't want to develop on and land you would want to develop on. Of course, you would assign priorities if you were going to use that land. And I think the state should cough up some land as a way to alleviate the problem in too little land. What happens is the scarcity of land forces the price of land up. And then the buyers from offshore who are willing to pay huge prices for land and condos, if you will. I mean, one of the buildings that are being built right now, the penthouse on that building is going for, are you sitting down? $100 million.
Penthouse?
Yeah, 100.
I mean, for me, I don't understand why you'd want to live
I don't
in
know
a
why you
penthouse.
don't buy that, Hillary. Go for it. Take a chance. Dig deep.
But I mean, if you're living in Hawaii, I mean, I guess, a penthouse is a penthouse anywhere. It's beautiful. But wouldn't you want, if you're going to spend all that money, get a farm on Big Island?
People do. They want to take the money out of China, for example. I'm not sure this is a
right.
Chinese deal, but they want to take their money out of China. They put it here. And when the Japanese came in the 70s and the 80s, they did the same thing. They pay really anything you ask, not thinking that the high prices they were paying for these, quote, trophy properties were causing land values to go up because they are comparables, right? A real estate comparable, an appraisal comparable. So if this place sells for what the developer wants, $100 million, that's going to be a comparable for other properties. And so all the properties go up and all the value of the land all around go up.
Yeah, but I mean, depends what the people are buying the land for, right? So if you're buying it as an investment to eventually flip it down the line, then having the prices of the land and the property going up maybe isn't such a bad thing, but for the community.
Well, so if I'm a landlord across the street, okay, the value of my property goes up too. And the value of my property tax goes up. Cost of my property tax goes up. But more important, if I sell that, the next guy has to pay more, and he has to get his investment out, so the rent that he charges for his tenants, whether they be commercial tenants or residential tenants, is going to be higher. So the cost ultimately is the cost of occupancy. So all these comparables raise the values and thus the cost of occupancy. We're paying too much for occupancy in the state. So you have to start out with that.
Right. So,
that's fundamental in every business deal, in every business, and every residence.
Sort of rumor I've heard, or the word on the street is that the military also brings the prices up because they give a set base allowance for housing.
That's true. That was in the paper a month or two ago. Yeah, that's absolutely true. What are you going to do? I mean, all these things, and the real estate industry, benefits by having higher values.
Right.
For example, a real estate broker who works on a commission makes more money if the place sells for more a higher purchase price. So, everything that's focused around we have a huge real estate industry of handling these transactions in and out. And everybody in the industry does well if there are more transactions at higher prices. And so we've been ginning up the price for a long time. I'd say, since the 70s anyway, and they're really high now. They had a bit of a dip in the 90s, but they're really high now. And the result is, there's no surprise, at the bottom end of the curve, it's too expensive for a guy who doesn't make much money in his job. The homeless didn't get that way because, some of the homeless didn't get that way because they had no job. It's because the job or jobs that they had, many times was more than one job involved, among husband and wife and who knows what in the family. They didn't have enough income to cover the rent or the mortgage, if there was a mortgage. And the result is they're homeless. But not every homeless person had no job. A lot of them had jobs, they just couldn't make it work. So they couldn't pay, they were evicted, end of stories, they're on the street. I'm just setting the stage for you here.
Right.
So then we have the high cost of occupancy is higher than people can earn to support. A lot of people, especially on the lower edge, lower end of the economic, economic continuum. Then you have the fact that salaries here are low for everybody, except a few very well-paid corporate executives who get really very large salaries. But for the most part, salaries for like work, like professional standing and training, are less than they are on the mainland.
Yeah,
I don't fully understand that, and of course in Waikiki it's close to minimum wage. There's a lot of minimum wage jobs in the state, whatever the minimum wage happens to be. So that's another factor that you build in, okay? So land and housing and occupancy is expensive more perhaps than it should be, and jobs don't pay as much as they should
Right, and as well, there's a difficulty on this island is there's only 3 industries. And those industries can sort of set the pay rates, and they could, throughout, there's the service industries, there's government, and there's military. And outside of that, government jobs don't pay very well in general. Well, they depends what you're doing and who you are and how your retirement and everything.
Middle management state job for $125. It's
state.
not bad. And then you get a really big retirement and you get medical, lots of medical. Not a bad deal. That's why so many people want to work for the government in the state.
Right. And, then you have the service industry, the tourist industry, and the accompanying real estate industry that some are very lucrative. I'm sure there's a lot of people making a lot of money on real estate on this island, and then a lot of them, if you're working lower management in a hotel, how far up can you move up? And there's only so many hotels and so many jobs on it.
Well, that's another issue. In the hotels, and we're doing a program on this, on September 17th. I hope you come down. This is a program at the Anthology Theater in Hawaii Tower.
Oh,
we're
that sounds great. We're
going to cover Hawaii, the state of hospitality. Have we reached the limits? And because there are those who feel that hospitality, tourism only goes so far, and after that you can't build it anymore for lots of reasons. And what do we do about that? How do we increase it in the face of those limits? But, and by the way, reaching those limits is not a good thing for our economy, because it means the jobs are frozen, right? It means you can't get any bigger and better. And it's important to figure out a way around that natural phenomenon, that economic phenomenon. Okay, but let me go back to my syllogism, if you will. Okay, so jobs don't pay as well. On top of that, because we are an island, everybody's been trained on this, because we are an island, we have to pay the cost of shipping everything in. And we don't really make much of an effort to do local agriculture. I would say that as against the aspiration of the government since John Burns was governor, to have a local agricultural diversified industry to replace the plantations, in terms of doing agriculture, we have failed. You know, young people that you know, very, very few of them actually go into agriculture, either conventional agriculture or high-tech agriculture. We are not producing very much food here. So we ship it all
Which is a
in.
shame because we have a 365-day-year growing season.
Right. We got every reason in the world to do that. And we have expertise here too, but you know, people don't want to graduate college and work with their hands in the fields and all that. And there's a, you know, there's a cultural charge on, you know, plantations. You know, we came from the plantation. You're asking us to go back.
Right.
It's not, you know.
Right. You know, because on the mainland, a lot of people are going back to the land, trying to go back to farming. It's almost sort of a hipster thing,
True.
if you will, because people are saying, okay, you know, we're looking at our food system, we're looking at climate change, we're looking at consumption. Okay, something isn't fitting in, and as well, our lifestyles in cities aren't satisfying. So people are, you know, that's why WWOOFing, World Wide Organic Farming, or I can't remember the acronym.
Aquaponics.
That's huge. Aquaponics are huge. I mean, these things are huge other parts of the country, but the thing about Hawaii that I found is sometimes it's a little bit behind the rest of the country because Hawaii does things at its own pace. It doesn't go do things because of trends.
We are terrified of change.
Right. So I don't hear young people here as much talking about this. I mean, you meet people who are coming from the mainland that want to farm, that become involved in organic farming, you know, the ranch over on the east side, and a lot of students at UH, but locals, you very rarely hear locals saying, oh yeah, like, you know, there's going to be a revolution, this is a way to become more independent. This isn't even in the consciousness of a lot of
Can't
people.
get the land. It goes back again to the land. If you decided that you wanted to be a farmer, you'd have to get control of some land. And if you had a farm, a high-tech farm especially, where you didn't have to get your hands so dirty, where you could have leverage, you need technology and it costs money. So, you know, the question is whether a bank is going to lend you money on a farm. They don't. The question is whether the bank is going to give you a mortgage on buying a farm or getting a lease for a farm. It's very hard. And so a lot of kids out of school, they're just discouraged by that. And there's no agency that really goes, the Department of Agriculture doesn't do anything about this, nothing meaningful. It's like tech, it's the same thing. You know, farming could be a great career, an exciting career, a career where you push the technological envelope, where you learn everything from Sitar at the university. Was it the School of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources? Don't ask me why human resources is tropical agriculture, but that's another question.
A lot of people would work in agriculture to get away from humans.
Maybe so. You know, it was back in the plantation day where human resources was part of part of the plantations, and so they lumped it all together. And that school is very old. You know, it's as old as the university is. Anyway, it's the same thing as tech, where the legislature hasn't really done very much to incentivize tech. This has been a discussion since John Burns, too, the first governor, the second governor, first real governor of the state of Hawaii. And, you know, we haven't really developed a tech industry. A tech industry would pay more. Tech pays more than working in a hotel. Okay, we don't have those jobs. And to the extent that there were people who came for those jobs back in the early 2000s, you know, the blush of technology at that time, they left already. And now we have certain entrepreneurs happening, we have certain organizations would like to see it grow, but really it's a minimal industry in the state. Too bad. We need much more of it, and we need to incentivize, sort of the way San Diego incentivized biotech, you know, 30 years ago, and now it's the center of biotech in the country. Anyway, so putting that aside, the problem is we don't have high-paying jobs, and we are not self-reliant in terms of food or manufacturing or anything like that. So we have to bring everything in, and that's the setting for our discussion of the Jones Act.
On that note, we're going to take a quick break.
Perfect.
Then we'll come back and we'll talk all about the Jones Act and explain to you what the heck that is. See you soon.
Aloha, my name is Jim Sean, and I'm host of a show called Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. Each week, live streaming at noon on ThinkTech Hawaii, we interview people who have special insights into education, from early education through K-12, all the way through higher education and beyond. Both public and private are areas we're interested in. We dig deeper. We try to find out what it's really like to be involved in making change, advocating for it, how you reform, what people's philosophies are in reforming it. As I said, we're live streaming every Wednesday at noon on ThinkTech Hawaii. And later on, you can find these interviews on YouTube and on the Hawaii Educational Policy Center website. We hope you join us as many times as possible. Aloha.
Welcome back to The Whole Gamut on ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm here with ThinkTech Hawaii inspiration and founder and everything, Jay Fidell, and we're here talking to you about the Jones Act. So, Jay, finally, the big reveal. What is the Jones Act?
Oh, this has been discussed many times on ThinkTech. Not because we take a particular position on it, but we think it should be discussed a lot. It's a very important issue because the stakes are so high. It's an act that says, and has said since 1920, federal act, that says, you can't have a ship stop at 2 consecutive ports in the United States unless you meet certain requirements. And they are the ownership of the ship, the construction of the ship.
Mm-hmm.
I know I'm going to miss one here. The staffing of the ship, and there's probably
There's a few.
what else was it?
The flags have to be American.
Oh, sure, it has to be
Right,
a
right.
U.S. flagship. Those are the requirements, and there are percentages in some of them. But the point is you have to meet these requirements for it to be an American ship, for it to make 2 consecutive stops, 2 consecutive ports in the United States.
Which is interesting because it's one of the very few things that still we insist that is American-made in our country.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it reminds me of, what was it, the Monterey.
Mm-hmm.
The Monterey. The Monterey was one of those ships like the Lurleen that plied the tourist trade between here and the mainland years ago. And I think it was a Matson ship. And all the old Lang Syne and the lays in the water, just
Mm-hmm.
like the Lurleen, that was the Monterey. And it was in mothballs for a while, and then some lawyers out of Washington D.C. bought it. Okay, but it was old, so they fixed it up. They fixed it up in a shipyard. Wartsila was Wartsila, which was at the time the national shipyard owned by the government in Finland.
So it's
Okay.
an American shipyard in Finland.
No, it was a Finnish. You're
Finnish
getting to the
shipyard.
point.
Okay,
That's it.
got it.
That's it. So they decided they're going to fix this sucker up, and they took it over to Finland, and they put a lot of money into it. They extended the ship. They cut it right down the middle, right, like clunk, and then they put in a certain section of additional steel, all the decks, and they made it a longer, bigger ship. Okay, this is a big deal. It costs a lot
Right.
of money to do that, and you need a big shipyard, a really big shipyard to do that, and they did it. And they brought it back, and they put it where it was originally plying the trade that is here, from here to the mainland, and it was a luxury cruise ship. So what happened at that point is that there were, I guess you would say there were enemies of the ship.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall who they were, but they didn't like it much, and so they filed a lawsuit. Okay, in Washington, I guess where the ownership of the ship was domiciled. And they claimed that this was not an American hull, that a certain percentage of the steel in the hull had been installed in Finland, not in the United States. So the Monterey did not meet the specifications under the Jones
Okay.
Act.
So this is getting quite nitty-gritty.
Well,
So it
what
has-
happened is the Monterey, for that and other reasons, died. It ended. It couldn't continue. It was a very sad case that we had a ship that was bringing tourists here, that was plying the trade, that was giving us, marine capability, and it went away. Nobody ever replaced it. It's gone now, and it was a very sad story. The people who worked on the ship were American, right? It was for all purposes an American ship, but this technical requirement of the steel in the hull killed it. Of course, there was politics involved. Because if you didn't know, politics lives strong on the waterfront. The waterfront is loaded with politics.
Okay, the current Hawaii waterfront, this is what we're talking about now. The ports in Hawaii have a lot of are very political. Now, it's interesting, when I moved here, I thought everyone would be always on ships. I mean, like, yeah, canoes and stuff, but people go on ships, you go back and forth to the islands. Things are always coming in and out. Like, I thought it would be very much a culture around these ports. And I found the average Hawaiian isn't involved in that at all.
You found what?
Aren't involved in that at all. People don't go on ships. I was shocked to find out there's no ships and ferries between the islands. I mean, let's talk about this. Why is there not so much this culture? What's preventing that?
That's such a good point, Hillary. You know, one of my goddaughters was on the Hokulea, and we collectively, sponsors and the government, spend a lot of money having the Hokulea, which is running in I'm not sure that's the right one, there's two of them, running in the Indian Ocean right now on a kind of a worldwide trip that will take years, okay? So we are supporting that, the Polynesian canoe thing. And what's interesting is that that's a statement of Hawaii's connection with the ocean. I mean, even one of the arguments against the 30-meter telescope is that when the Hawaiians first came to Hawaii, they approached from the south, and they could see Mauna Kea up there, and it was a navigational vector for them. And again, it was something that to demonstrate how important the sea, the ocean, navigation, the ability to be facile on the waters, on the ocean, was to the Hawaiian culture. And yet, with all of that, we knock off the super ferry. We don't have the super ferry. It's gone. Furthermore, we don't have a ferry of any kind. Zero zippity-doo ferry. We're a water-surrounded state. We have water between all the islands. One really good way to travel between the islands would be by water. We used to have ferries before airplanes got popular. That's how everybody got around. But now, did I say that before? There
Zero.
is no single ferry anywhere.
It's a disambiguation of Hawaiian culture and local Hawaiians from something that's very essential to this culture.
Yes.
So, and I wonder, it's so, to get a little philosophical and rah about this, but it's a taking away, when you take away some part of someone's culture, whether it's language or something else that's very essential, then you want to homogenize the culture to the dominant culture. And two, you prevent that culture from fully expressing itself, from becoming something of its own. And then a lot of times, the parts from that culture that are missing, they have to go to the dominant culture. And so maybe this all ties into the, local Hawaiian culture being put second in a lot of ways to Western culture, American culture. I mean, we're in Polynesia.
Yeah, well, where are the priorities? I mean, the people who would support the notion that Mauna Kea is an iconic navigational place are the same people who would oppose the super ferry. So there's a kind of a contradiction in all of that. So I think we don't really think it through. We as a state really don't think it through. We should have ferries everywhere. We should have boats. We should have ocean. What a great thing for tourism. I said before, that tourism may have a glass ceiling. Well, you could relieve the glass ceiling with lots of cruise liners. They would come from all over the place. But the problem is that a lot of them don't want to stop in Hawaii because they can't make two stops at contiguous ports, at consecutive ports in the United States because of the Jones Act. It's a real problem. And I don't know why we gave it up. Somewhere along the line, we gave up the notion of being a seafaring state. We are not, as you say, we are not a seafaring state. We should be all over the Jones Act. We should be seeking amendment of the Jones Act, not the whole thing necessarily, but parts of it, to alleviate this problem and to make Hawaii work as a seafaring state.
So, when I moved to Hawaii about 1.5 years ago, I thought I was moving to, a Havana or a Rio de Janeiro or Lisbon, a port city that was very lively and international and everything. And in a lot of ways I did. However, like you're saying, because it cannot, ships cannot stop at Hawaii and then go to the mainland U.S., that takes away that culture and takes away that opportunity to become this lively seafaring
Imagine
movement.
cruise ships from all over the world would stop here. and then go to California or whatever on the West Coast. But what happens is they just go to California. We're cutting ourselves out. And this, I mean, that's just one element of the Jones Act. The other, of course, is the price of imported food, the price of imported manufactured goods. Everything we have and buy comes from somewhere else. And it's very interesting that we can't take it by sea. Or rather, we can take it by sea, but it'll cost us so much money. And I find it interesting, you know, look at the studio here. A lot of stuff here in the studio had to come from somewhere else, but it didn't come by sea. It came by air. And so what's happened is the airlines cargo is doing fine because it's not subject to the Jones Act. It has its own limitations, but it's not subject to the Jones Act. The one where we really get hurt is on the bulk cargo at sea. We pay much too much for that. Why? Because we have to pay so much more to construct a ship that qualifies for the Jones Act. I think it's like 5 times as much. Okay, and you have to borrow the money and pay it back. And this is a cost of doing business with that ship. Okay, and you have to charge your customers for that. And that means you have to charge them a lot more because you had to spend so much more money. If you go to, you know, Louisiana, there's only 1 or 2 shipyards left in the country, and very few employees are actually working, making American ships. I don't know, they make 1 or 2 a year. I mean, it's really peanuts, sorry. And the jobs are peanuts too. But the maritime unions have used this as a way to block any amendment to the Jones Act on that point of requirement. If you were able to go to Korea, South Korea is like a global leader in shipbuilding, you could buy the ship at a fraction of that, a fraction of it, and you could have it here, and it would be a fraction of the loan and the cost.
South Korea is probably closer to here than Louisiana is.
This is all in the name of what? Maritime security, which is really not very important these days. I'm sorry, it doesn't mean anything. The notion was back in World War I, this was passed in 1920, back in World War I, you wanted to make sure that your maritime industry could be converted to military uses. And so you wanted to preserve shipbuilding, and you wanted to, it did not have that effect, though.
The ships that, you know, our Navy uses are so much more advanced and complex than a ship that would be used to just, you know, I order a book on Amazon and it comes across the ocean on a boat.
Yeah.
But, you know, you don't need a an air carrier for that.
Right.
Where, you know, you can lift airplanes off the back.
Right.
You just need a ship that can hold things, that doesn't sink.
Well, the result is that we pay too much for everything. Not to say that liquid natural gas is a solution to all our issues here about energy, but the fact is that in order to bring in bulk liquid natural gas, we have to build a ship that was dedicated to that. And the result is we'd have to spend far too much for it. And if we spend far too much, we pay more for the gas. So it affects everything we do. And when you take that on, I'm leading you to a break here. when you take that on top of the fact that we pay too much for land, that we don't have good jobs, we have low-paid jobs, and now on top of that, everything we buy with our limited funds, whatever's left after we pay, you know, too much for occupancy, we get too little for salary, whatever's left, we spend more than we have to buy manufactured goods and agricultural produce. And this is the problem. After the break, why don't we discuss what can be done about it?
Great idea. This is Hillary Weinberg on ThinkTech Hawaii. We are here. We are on Twitter at ThinkTechHI. We'll be right back.
Aloha, my name is Josh Green. I'm a senator from the Big Island. I work in the ER there. But on Tuesday afternoons, I get to come and spend 45 minutes to an hour with Jay Fidell and the ThinkTech staff. They're terrific professionals. They help us to bring some of the leading cutting-edge topics here across our state to you. So you can join us at our show on healthcare in Hawaii to talk with leaders from across all the spectrum of health in our state, or you can join us for any other show where we talk about economic development or tourism or some really eclectic programs too. So really, we'd love to see you here on our show. Thanks for joining us and thanks for supporting us.
Hi, my name is Stan Osserman, and I host the show every Friday here on ThinkTech Hawaii called Stan the Energy Man. We talk about everything energy, from anaerobic digesters to batteries to hydrogen fuel cell and grid power. And we do that to keep you informed on the latest technology that's out there and the things that are going on in Hawaii. We broadcast every Friday from noon until 1 o'clock, and I hope you'll tune in. So sometimes we'll be on ThinkTech, and sometimes we'll be on Olelo Channel 54, and I'd like you to listen in to me and join me every Friday. We'll see you then. Aloha.
Welcome back to The Whole Gamut with Hillary Weinberg and Jay Fidell. We're here today talking about the Jones Act. So we ended on the note saying, what can we do about the Jones Act? Go. What can we do?
Well, what we have elected to do since, I don't know if there was amendment along the way, but for the past long time, I think if there was amendment, it was minor. We have elected to leave it the same. And we in Puerto Rico and Guam, those three places are the ones that are most critically affected by the Jones Act.
What about Alaska?
No. What about Alaska? I don't think Alaska has the same problem. I don't know that, though. I had not heard Alaska's name mentioned. I guess it's because Puerto Rico and Guam and Hawaii are all island states.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't work the same way
Right, they can
between
get
an
stuff
island state and a contiguous U.S.
through trucking and rail
Right,
and everything.
exactly.
Okay, so this is a problem of island states and territories.
Yeah,
So,
island jurisdictions.
all right.
And Puerto Rico has been adopting, in fact, we were involved in some testimony here by Mike Hansen, who you know his name, he's been writing on the subject, and he's appeared here on ThinkTech a number of times. Testimony to the legislature in Puerto Rico using Skype from here, from the studio. Isn't that cool? And
Yeah.
Puerto Rico adopted some resolutions, to be addressed to Congress that the government of Puerto Rico, that the legislature of Puerto Rico wanted a change in the Jones Act in Washington. I don't think Congress has changed the Jones Act in Washington. And there are attempts for the same resolution here. I'm not sure I don't think they've actually passed, though. But Hansen and others are working for that to try to get the legislature here to adopt a resolution encouraging Congress to amend the Jones Act. Mind you, the Jones Act is federal, so the state legislature cannot adopt a change, but it can adopt a resolution suggesting Congress change. Yeah.
Okay, so what are Hawaiian politicians doing about this? This is important. This is affects our ability to lead a decent quality of life because it's increasing our cost of living. What's the politicians in Hawaii doing? What are they doing? Our elected officials?
It's huge. I mean, it's a huge thing. If you started tallying up the amount of money that we pay that we shouldn't have to pay for everything we buy at the store, everything, all the manufactured goods, your house is loaded with manufactured goods that you paid a Jones Act tax on.
Right.
And we don't have enough tax. I mean, really, the gross excise tax is the highest point of sale tax in the country because it affects everything. It's a huge revenue raiser for the counties, huge, and the state. This is also a tax in a way, and I don't understand why we don't change it, but we haven't changed it, and I think we have to understand the enormity of it. I'm not sure the legislature understands the enormity. There have been studies on exactly how much this costs you and me and how it dampens business and it makes life in the islands that much more difficult for the people at the disadvantaged end of things. So we really need to change this. But, the years come, sunrise, may I sing? Sunrise, sunset. And we talk about it, but nothing has changed here. No resolutions. There might be a champion, I don't know, in the legislature who would support it. But for the most part, the legislature is not interested in doing anything like Puerto Rico to make a resolution. And I think that's really sad because and then let's talk about the delegation in Washington. There are 4 members of the delegation.
Okay.
And none of the 4 support change. And in fact, the people who run for office, like Colleen Hanabusa, last time she ran, she did not support changing the Jones Act. I can't understand that because there's for Hawaii, there's no question. We would help our people. We would help them live. We would help the state become more sustainable, the economy become seriously better, the lives of our individual middle-class people trying to hold on to things. That would be better for everybody. Why not change the Jones Act for the benefit of a union in Louisiana? Come on. A union that has only a very few employees, a shipyard that is of no consequence in the world market for ships. I mean, there's no need for, maritime security in the face of a war like World War I or World War II. That's really silly. It's passed by 100 years. What are we doing? Why is the delegation not changing this for the benefit of the people? There is no reason. The reason is that the unions involved, maritime unions, support politicians who oppose amending the Jones Act.
Right, and since Hawaii and Puerto Rico and Guam are smaller territory, they don't have as much political clout. We're so far away. We don't send as many people there.
Yeah.
And for us, this is, for most states, this is probably just a non-issue. I mean, it's what does the
Right.
Jones Act, how does this affect us? Why this is huge. I
They
mean,
don't care.
you go to Safeway, and it can't, so if you're ever broke on the mainland, you want to eat, you buy a can of beans and a bag of rice. That's how you eat. That here costs $10. Why does it cost so much money? I mean, why is everything, the price of everything, and why is it that the goods that we get from Asia are cheaper? You go into the supermarket, and all the Asian specialty goods on the mainland would be very expensive, are dirt cheap here. Are those coming directly from Japan and China
I
and
guess so.
Korea?
Maybe they're being flown in, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I mean, the big staples are coming, by, I guess they come by ship from South America. You got a big expense in fuel expense, fossil fuel expense, in bringing them here. They're not as fresh, not as good as local agriculture. But you can't have a ship that plies in a triangular fashion, like the Bermuda Triangle, where you're going to two ports, picking up stuff and dropping stuff off. So we cut ourselves out of a lot of the routes that would make it cheaper to
Right.
bring manufactured goods and produce here.
So I read before the show today that Kinder Morgan, which is a shipping company, has bought some more American-made ships that meet all the qualifications, and they're run by LNG. Now, this is interesting because also recently, our governor has said we will not spend a dime trying to install LNG facilities on Hawaii because we want to promote renewable, we want to get off the grid, we don't want to have to rely on imports as much. So, but weighing these two, what will overall increase our, what if we get, a whole fleet of LNG ships from the mainland? What if LNG, we do more shipping and LNG is the way we're shipping in the future?
If we could use a Korean ship for LNG between here and the mainland, we could save a lot of money on the cost of the ship, because the ship could then ply back and forth and elsewhere. The foreign ship plying back and forth between American ports. We could take all that natural gas, put it on a dedicated LNG ship, bring it out here. It would really make LNG cheap. LNG is cheaper than other fuels, but you have a huge cost if you don't have a dedicated ship, or if you have a ship that's a dedicated ship that costs way too much, and you're sort of detracting from the benefit of the bargain for LNG. I guess that's the critical point of it. If we wanted to do LNG proper, we would have a dedicated ship, a big ship, but it would have to be built overseas because it would take too much money to build it in an American shipyard. It's a high-tech ship. It's got tanks for pressurized tanks for the gas. I don't think you can get it for a reasonable price in the U.S. You pay a lot less in Korea, where they make these ships on a regular basis to do LNG elsewhere. So if we want to do that, and it's not clear we do, if we want to do that, we should have a waiver. And you mentioned before the show, we should have a waiver or an amendment of the Jones Act to allow it to happen. Otherwise, it can't happen. I'm not opining on the kind of energy we should have here, but if we wanted to have LNG, that's what we would do. Without it, it's much more difficult to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, so as we were discussing this before the show, and
Sandy.
Hurricane Sandy?
Hurricane Sandy.
No, we were talking about heating oil.
Yeah, and there was a shortage of heating oil, and
Right.
people couldn't heat their homes
Yes.
because there were no Jones Act ships that deliver
Heating
the
oil.
heating oil from.
So in the Northeast a few years ago,
Yeah.
there was a heating oil shortage.
Yeah.
Brought the price of heating oil way up. And on the Northeast, most people still heat their homes with heating oil, and it was an extremely, extremely cold, blizzardy winter out there. And there was a shortage, and there was heating oil available in Texas and other parts of the country that could be shipped up to New York.
There were no ships.
But there were no ships.
No American
No
qualified
American
Jones
ships that
Act
could do it.
ships.
There wasn't enough pipelines, there weren't enough ships. So eventually the government had to do a waiver, so they can, something about the Jones Act is you can have waivers in states of emergency. But what is a state of emergency? And,
I mean, to me, Hawaii's in a state of economic emergency.
right,
Right
with
now.
our homeless problems, our
Right now.
inability to afford to live here.
Yeah.
All right,
Well, Congress has to wrestle with this, but it's really a long shot to say that Congress is going to do anything. If the delegation from the state, most effective, we are the only state, okay, who has this problem. We're the only island state. Puerto Rico's not a state, Guam's not a state. We are a significant jurisdiction here, and if our delegation isn't going to do anything about it, it's not likely that the people from Nebraska are going to care. So our delegation should get involved in this. They should not be affected by union contributions, and they should see the equities, and they should see the arguments, and they should see the benefits for our people. Tell them. This is your generation speaking, Hillary. Tell them.
yeah, we all should.
Use that camera.
And we all should get more involved over the next election cycle. As on our show last week, we had a prominent leader in the Republican Party here talking about this, and I wish we talked about this topic last week. But there's only so much time. We only have 45 minutes, unfortunately. So on that note, we're all done for the week. Hope to see you next time. I'm Hillary Weinberg on The Whole Gamut. I'm with Jay Fidell. And if you want to get us on Twitter, we're at ThinkTech Hawaii. So that's at ThinkTech HI. Have a great day.